Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Richard Moglen and welcome to this week's weekly watch list. On the list today is 15 different stocks, a couple different repeats from last week, and also a few honorable mentions that I'll also be watching. And before we get started, I just want to briefly mention kind of my schedule for this week in terms of posting videos. Going up today, obviously, is this video, and then my plan is for Tuesday to post a stock market winners analysis of Tesla. And then on Tuesday will be my next video for my Python for Finance series. And in this video, I'll be covering how to simulate trades and how to calculate your summary statistics. So this is kind of a brief overview of the code. It's definitely a step above what I did in my previous video. And it's also a lot more interesting. So I hope you guys tune in for those videos, but let's get started with this week's weekly watch list. On the list for this week is AMD, ATKR, CZZ, ERI, FISV, KLAC, LSCC, NEO, PFSI, PING, SPXC, TTD, VCTR, XP, and PGNY. We've got a bunch of new IPOs and also some potential green line breakouts. So now what we'll do is go through each of these charts, both on the daily and weekly, and maybe check out the GMMA charts for them as well. So starting with AMD, you can see that it's just arriving at the green line now, and it was actually a failed green line breakout this past week. So looking at the daily chart, you can see it tried to break out here on increased volume, but then was met with too much resistance, too much selling, and is now just kind of consolidating and going flat right along this green line. So it's a positive that it's not kind of dropping back down very quickly, but I want to see it tighten up, the volume to drop, and then move upwards once again and really have a strong green line breakout. And if that happens, I will most likely add to my position, which I started on this bar right here when it broke through the line of resistance. So now looking at ATKR, you can see that it's the chart pattern that I like to see. It's a recent company, it's forming new all-time highs, and now it's just consolidating near these all-time highs. So you've got a bunch of potential entry points here with some Bollinger Band bounces, and then I've got a couple lines of resistance here at the 41.31 and 42.67 levels, and I want to see it break through that and kind of form new all-time highs, and I would most likely take a position when it breaks through this level on increased volume. On the weekly chart, you can see clearly the sustained uptrend it's been in really since the start of 2019. A very strong increase. Let's see actually what that percent change is. 108%. Let's go to the daily copy, and you can see that it's been in a red, white, blue pattern. It didn't really break it there, so actually almost since July of this year, it's been in a daily red, white, blue pattern, which kind of shows you the power of entering stocks when they first form that red, white, blue pattern, and then potentially sell when they really tighten up and kind of lose that clear white space in between them. Next, we've got CZZ, which is also right near all-time highs and is consolidating nicely right below this previous line of resistance that it met right here at 23.7. So once again, I would like to see it break through this on increased volume and have a strong breakout. Let's look at the weekly chart, and you can see that it's above the previous all-time highs, and it's been in a very good trend since 2016 actually. Now taking a look at ERI, you can see that it's also consolidating right near all-time highs after breaking through the green line during mid-December. And now it's formed its first green dot, which is something that I'm looking at more and more. I think the first green dot setup after breaking through that green line is a powerful combination. Just take a look at LK and you can see exactly what I mean. It broke through and then consolidated, and now it had that change of momentum indicator, and since then it's been doing really, really well, up 36% from that point. So that's what I hope to see from ERI, and I would want to see it break through the 60.33 level that I've indicated here, which is basically just resistance. Next, we've got FISV, which is on my list from the past week, and you can see that it did break through the line that I indicated, but it gapped up and then fell right back into the base, which is a negative sign. So I really want to see a strong breakout on above average volume, something like this day right here would be ideal. So now looking at KLAC, you can see that's kind of forming maybe a cup and handle pattern after increasing from June of this year until really mid-November. So it's kind of breaking down a little bit on this last day, but I did notice that it was on decreased volume. So that didn't worry me too much, but my buy point would be if it breaks through kind of around this area here. So let's go ahead and put this in. I want to see it kind of really form this handle and come up strongly on increased volume, and that would be ideal. Next, we've got LSCC, which is benefiting from really all the kind of semiconductor and chip stocks doing really well the past few weeks. And finally, it's kind of making its way through the green line that it set in 9/13 of this year. And you can see it tried to break through this past week, but failed. So I really want to see a good breakout on increased volume and follow through days as well. And looking at the weekly chart, you can see how well it's been doing this year. Some huge increases with a big week here in February. Next, we've got NEO, which is consolidating near all-time highs, which is like my favorite setup. And I want to see it follow on this breakout this past Friday, and I want to see some volume coming in as well on these follow-through days. Next, we've got PFSI, which was on my list from this past week. And just as I said, this past week, I want to see it break through the 34.67 level, which was resistance in the past. Next, we've got Ping, which was actually on my list this past week as well. And you can see it had a breakout and a green dot on this past Friday, which was an encouraging sign. However, you do see that there's not that much volume coming in. So this is a promising new issue, but even though its fundamentals are good, we want to see confirmation that institutions are taking up shares in the stock. And how we see that on the charts is through the volume indicator. Next, we've got XPSC, which is consolidating near a 52-week high, although you do see that if you zoom out on the monthly chart, you can see that it's not quite where it was in 2015. So you got to be careful here because there could be some overhead supply, and you had a big drop in September of 2015. So it's not quite as strong a setup as if it was breaking into new high grounds, but it's still been on a very good run since June of this year. Next, we've got TTD, which is another potential green line breakout. You can see on Thursday of last year, it attempted to actually break through, but then was knocked back down. So I will be watching this stock pretty closely because often the second green line breakout attempt is even more powerful than the first. So I want to see a breakthrough and a close above the green line on increased volume. That would be the entry setup. But overall, TTD is a very good stock to watch. And since its IPO, it's been doing very, very well. And it may even form kind of a cup and handle pattern here after it gets knocked down and then comes back through the green line. So be on the lookout for that. Now taking a look at VCTR, you can see that it's forming a nice consolidation right near all-time highs. And on these past few days, it's kind of had a big range, but it is closing near the 21.22 mark. And I want to see it break through this kind of trend line here on increased volume. I've owned this stock since here, and I've been patient, and it hasn't hit my stop. So I'll continue to stay in it just because its fundamentals are so strong. Next, we've got XP, which is a very new IPO, and you can see that it's kind of forming its first IPO base at this moment. And you had some potential entries here with a Bollinger Band bounce and a green dot indicator on this past Friday. You have to be careful with these stocks simply because they're a little bit more volatile. But if it moves through this 40.5 level on increased volume, I will most likely take up a position. And last, we've got another recent IPO, PGNY, which is also forming kind of its first IPO base right here. And I've set two levels here, 30.68 and 32.00. I might take up a starting position if it moves through the 30.68 level, and also take up even more shares if it moves through this 32 level. So now that we've talked about the main stocks on my watch list, I just want to quickly go through some honorable mentions. So When I was looking through 200 stocks or so, I noticed AZPN, which has been on a big tear this past 2 weeks almost. And when a stock is doing this, that shows something about the company. It shows that something special is happening. The fundamentals actually aren't that great, but I'm just going to be on the lookout, and I'll definitely be watching to see if it breaks through this green line or if it consolidates right below it and then moves through. I think I'll most likely take up at least a small position. Next, we've got InMode, which it's not my type of trade, but you can see it's breaking through the trend line, the downward trend line that it was forming, and on increased volume as well. And then we've got the TQQ, which is going up. And now we have Zoom, which is another trade that isn't my type of trade, but you can see it's recovering well since it got knocked down all the way from 105 to 61. So if it breaks through this line right here, probably a lot of people who are shorting this stock will get squeezed, and it might pop up even more. So that's just another idea for you. And then finally, we've got ARWR, which I highlighted on my previous watch list. And I don't think there's a good setup yet, but I will be watching to see if it bounces off this 50-day moving average. It's a very strong fundamental stock. It's profitable, which is rare for pharmaceutical companies. So it's definitely one to keep on your watch list. But overall, that is my watch list for this week in terms of technicals. And now we'll go ahead and take a look at my fundamental ranking scale and kind of look at how their earnings, sales, and return on equity is for each of these stocks. So starting with VCTR, I've talked about this before. It's got very good fundamentals. You've got an EPS percent change last quarter of over 100%. The estimates are really good as well. And you've got sales last quarter going up 99% and really good return on equity and after-tax margins. Next, we've got PFSI, which is really doing well in terms of earnings. You've got plus 165% last quarter and projected up 141% this quarter as well. And you can also see that for the year, you've got estimates up 99%, which is a very strong number. And then you've got sales supporting that earnings growth, and also, however, not that great return on equity of only 8.3%. The margins are actually very good though, at around 28%. Next, we've got NEO, which is rated pretty highly by IBD, and you can see decent EPS percent change numbers, up 40% last quarter. However, it's projected to not really change at all this quarter. So you want to see EPS percent change growth year or quarter after quarter. So that isn't the most positive sign. And let's take a look at its return on equity. It's also pretty weak at 7.3%, and its margins are only 7.2% as well. Now looking at LSCC, you can see it had a pretty good quarter, up 55% in terms of EPS change last quarter, and it's projected this quarter to be up 88%. So that is definitely a strong showing, and its yearly estimates are up 76%. So that is also definitely a good thing. In terms of return on equity, it's got 16.8, which is right on that kind of golden level of 17%. So that's a good thing. And its margins are pretty good as well. Looking at FISV, you can see that the earnings growth isn't too great. However, you do see a projected increase for this upcoming quarter. And you can see that the sales are up 122%, which is definitely a good number to see. And its return on equity and margins are very, very good. Now looking at TTD, you can see it's rated very, very highly by investors.com. However, its earnings seems to be slowing down a little bit. You've got only 15% change last quarter and a projected change of only 7% for this upcoming quarter. Looking at the sales, you can see though it's increasing 38%, which is a really good number to have, and it's a very well-managed company. It's got a return on equity of 38.7% and margins of 22%. Now taking a look at AMD, you can see you've got good composite ratings and relative strength ratings. However, the EPS rating is only a 38. It was a positive percent change this past quarter. However, you can see for the past 2 quarters, it's been down. But what I'd like to see is this estimates for the current quarter is up 288%, which is a really good number to have. And its estimates for the year are also up 35%. In terms of sales, it was only up 9% last quarter. I would like to see that supporting the EPS change, but hopefully in the next earnings report, this will be up as well. The return on equity is fantastic at 55.2%, and the after-tax margins are okay at 12.2%. Now taking a look at Ping, one of the new issues, you can see decent ratings from investors.com and really good earnings growth. You've got 450% this past quarter and projected 433% this next quarter. So really good growth numbers from Ping here. And you can see a 1000% EPS surprise, which is great. And the sales are also supporting the move, up 45% as well. However, in terms of return on equity, you've only got negative 1.3%, which is not good. But the after-tax margins are pretty decent. Next, we've got XP, which is another one of the IPOs. You can see the EPS rating is a 99, which is really interesting to see from an IPO. And you can see just quarter after quarter, it's been increasing, which is exactly what you want to see. And for the next upcoming quarter, it's projected to have another 100% increase, which is fantastic growth. And in terms of its sales, it's also up 84%, which is great. And its return on equity is 26.4, and its after-tax margin is 17%. So really surprising numbers and very strong numbers from a new issue. Next, we've got KLAC, which is ranked pretty highly from IBD for composite rating and relative strength rating. However, its earnings aren't doing that well. There's not much growth there. And its sales are increasing 29%, which is pretty decent. But it really shines in terms of its return on equity and after-tax margins. And getting down to it, we've got SPXC, which is ranked pretty highly by IBD and has pretty good earnings growth. You can see last quarter up 54%. However, it's projected only to increase 4% this upcoming quarter. And if you look at the sales, you can see they're also not increasing that much. However, its return on equity is very good at 27.4%, but its margins aren't that great at about 7.5%. Now looking at ATKR, you can see very good numbers from IBD and decent EPS growth, though nothing terribly explosive. And the sales aren't increasing that much. However, you've got a return on equity of 97.4, which is fantastic, and also okay after-tax margins at around 10%. Next, we've got CZZ, which is ranked again very highly from investors.com, and it's got very explosive EPS numbers. You can see growth last quarter of 833%. You've got an EPS surprise of 133%, which is really good to see. And in terms of sales, it's only increasing 15%. So ideally, the sales growth would also be exploding just like the EPS numbers. However, you've got that 14.5 return on equity, which is pretty good, and around a 10% after-tax margin. Next, we've got ERI, which is really good in terms of relative strength, but not so much in terms of the other two main ratings from IBD. And you can kind of see why the EPS rating is so poor. The past 2 quarters have been pretty bad. However, and this is what caught my eye, its estimates for the current quarter are up 3,100%. So that's a really big breakout, and that shows something important is happening to the stock. You can see the sales are also up 36%, and the return on equity is pretty good at 9.7%, but the margins aren't that great at around 6%. And finally, we've got PGNY, which is ranked very well in terms of relative strength, but not so much in terms of composite and EPS rating. You can see that last quarter it was down 900% in terms of EPS change. However, you've got and estimates for the current quarter up 150%. And in terms of sales, it's also up 120%, and its return on equity, you can see, is negative 5.4. So that's not what you want to see. And you can also see its after-tax margins are negative as well. So overall, here is my watch list for the upcoming trading week. I hope you guys found this video useful, and if you did, make sure you hit that like button down below. And if you're not subscribed, definitely hit that subscribe button. It's completely free. Best of luck this week, and I'll see you guys in future videos.